Here. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this final academic workshop as part of our orientation academic success series. So this morning, we are happy to have Maddie Barone here from the Dennis Learning Center to talk to you guys about some more strategies for being successful this in your first semester. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Maddie.
Thank you so much. So welcome everyone to the test taking workshop. My name is Maddie Barone and I'm a second year majoring in industrial engineering and industrial systems and engineering. And I'm originally from Westchester, Ohio, which is right near Cincinnati. So I'm an academic coach from the Dennis Learning Center. You guys have been attending these workshops all week, so I'm sure you already know a little bit about the Dennis Learning Center, but basically we support students academically by helping them with study skills like test taking, note taking, and all that good stuff. So today we will be going over confident test taking. So our objectives for this workshop is to learn how to prepare for exams, how to take exams, and how to leave feeling confident. So first up, we're going to be talking about what you should be doing before your exam starts just to prep. And that is going to begin with gathering information you need to know about the exam. So be sure to know what content is going to be covered, the format of the exam, and how confident you're feeling with each topic, because that is going to affect how long you need to study and maybe the different strategies you need to use to study. Next, we're going to talk about how to create a study plan. So in this example, we already identified the topics on the exam. So the next step is to break up the topics into a day-by-day plan. Start off by identifying how many days you want to be studying and the amount of time you want to study each day. And you can just do this on your own. Obviously, right now we're not following by as an example, but you can just use a sheet of paper or your planner and kind of plan out when you're going to be doing your studying. So you can mark down a specific time period of when you want to be studying, just to keep yourself accountable. It's definitely a great tip. After that, you're going to choose which strategies you want to use. So each day you should be preparing a study tool for your chosen topic. And then in the following days, you should be reviewing the study tools you created on the days prior. So as you go on, you can shorten the amount of time you spend reviewing for each chunk of information. For example, the third day of your study plan that you created, you could prepare a study tool for chapter 3 for 1 hour, review chapter 2 for 30 minutes, and review chapter 1 for 15 minutes. So each day you're going to want to be reviewing the tools that you already created. And this is just that repetition that is really going to make sure you know the information for your test. And don't worry if this is a little bit confusing right now, we're going to go more in depth on this in a minute. The last thing you're going to want to do is find time to self-test yourself before the exam. One thing to remember with online exams and in-person exams, one big difference is that in-person exams are probably no longer going to be open notes. So when you're doing that self-test, make sure you're not using any of your notes or anything like that, because you want to get a really good understanding of where you're at. So now we're going to talk more about the prepare and review steps that I mentioned earlier. The prepare step is when you organize information on the exam by creating a study tool, and I'll give some examples in a minute. And then the review step is when you use that tool you created to study for your exam. So like I said earlier, you will review each chapter every day after you create the study tool for varying amounts of time. So here are some examples of prepare strategies. And then we also have corresponding strategies that you would use to review. And of course, you can always modify these however they work the best for you. So if you're organizing your information by developing a concept map, you would review by replicating those concept maps from memory. If you created an outline of your lecture notes, you would recite the outline points when you were reviewing. So these are all fantastic strategies for studying for tests. Remember that you can always combine multiple strategies together, and that's just going to improve your recall because you're processing the information different ways. And then here are some just more examples. In the bottom right, we have a mind map, which is really great for visual learners. And then on the left, just 2 examples of different study sheets that students made. And then top right, of course, flashcards, which are a classic. So now we're going to be moving into the do's and don'ts of exam prep. Things you want to make sure you're doing is get proper sleep, continuing to socialize with your friends. It can be really easy to kind of shut down when you're really stressed or you have a big exam coming up. But spending time with your friends is going to reduce your stress and keep you in a good mood. So it really is good to continue socializing with people even through exam time. And then on that same note, getting stressed out through physical activity, make sure to make time for things that are important. And then the last thing, using the prep and review strategy or kind of system that we just talked through. If there are any questions at any point in the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll have it pulled up. And then the don'ts of exam prep are: do not pull an all-nighter. As tempting as it can be, pulling an all-nighter will never work in your favor. It is just not a good system, and it's much easier to kind of prepare out when you're going to study and do a little bit each day, as opposed to trying to shove it all in one night and not getting enough sleep. Another thing you should be sure to avoid is skipping meals or stress eating. It can be really difficult, but it's just important to be taking care of yourself during when you're near your exam time. Okay, so now we're going to be transitioning into what you should be doing during your exam. So it's important to know how much time you have for each question. Knowing how much time you have is a really easy way to reduce your stress and make you feel like you're on track. So the first thing you're going to want to do is find out how many questions you have on the exam and determine the total time you have. You can try and do this before the exam if your professor will give you that information, but if not, you can always just do it the day of when you're actually in that test. So next up, you're going to want to kind of split up your time. So be sure to leave time at the beginning to review the exam, just look over it and get a feel for it, and then also leave time at the end to check your work. Of course, this is the ideal situation, so be sure to adjust that as needed for what works for you. As you can see in the bottom right, that's just a little example of something you could jot down on your test to kind of keep you on track. So continuing to talk about time, how should you manage your time during a test? The first thing is to make wise investments up front. So this means looking over the test before starting and budgeting your time like we just talked about. The next thing is be sure to get easy stuff out of the way. The first time you go through, only answer the questions you know. Don't spend a lot of time on anything that you're unsure about, because it's better to come back later and build your confidence by answering those easy questions first. And then the last thing is to keep moving. So if a question stumps you after 5 to 10 seconds, just skip it and return to it later. Okay, so now we're going to talk about enhancing accuracy. Be sure to underline any important words from the question that you were asked to find. And this one is really helpful. Circle all absolutes and negatives. So for example, if you see the word always, every, never, or not, you really want to pay attention to that, because oftentimes it's not going to be like always this. And once again, it's just important to pay attention to the negatives, because that can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So now we're going to go over exam day do's and don'ts. What you do want to do is make yourself comfortable, make sure you're eating a healthy breakfast. You can even create like a pre-exam playlist if you want. When it's actually you're in the exam, you want to make sure you're pacing yourself, trying to remember those strategies that we just went over about skipping things and coming back. And lastly, and most importantly, is just make sure to relax and breathe. If you're following that 5-day study plan, you're studying anyway that works for you, you should feel confident and prepared. So just make sure to try and stay relaxed. Things you're not going to want to do is listen to other people before the exam. I know one of the most stressful things is walking into a classroom and hearing people talk about all these things on the exam that they studied or asking questions. And if someone mentions something that you didn't know or maybe didn't study as much, it kind of makes you a little bit nervous. So it's just nice to avoid listening to other people talk about the stuff before the exam. You already studied it, you already know it. Now it's just time to show what you learned. Do not, once again, on the eating thing, do not skip a meal. Try not to have extra caffeine. I know it can be tempting to drink a lot of caffeine right before a test, but that is probably not the best idea, especially if you're already a little bit anxious or nervous. Make sure you're not jumping right in. Once again, remember those strategies and just try and stay calm. So now we're going to move into a little bit more specific of test taking. So we're going to go over multiple choice exams and essay responses. So before reviewing answer choices, try and predict the answer. So what you're going to do is just cover up the answers, read the questions, and try and guess what the answer will be. Then you go through and you read all of the answer choices to find the most correct one. This is really helpful because it is pulling from your own knowledge base instead of just looking at the answers on the thing. That way, if answers do end matching up, you already know what it's going to be, versus sometimes reading the other answers can make it a little confusing. If this one sounds right and so does this one, this is a strategy to just help out with that a little bit. So next, you need to decide what is most correct by avoiding distractors and using the process of elimination. So narrow down your options by eliminating the answer if it's incorrect, irrelevant, the answer to another question, or if it's a familiar concept to you. So those are just some simple ways to eliminate things. Let's walk through this example right now. The question is, which of the following is an example of something you should do in order to help prepare for an exam? So the first step is to underline the information given by the question and what you were asked to find. So that is the you should do in order to help prepare for an exam. That's the key part of this question. Next, try to answer the question from your own knowledge without looking at the answers. So you can go ahead and do that on your own or in your head as just for an example to kind of get a feel for what it's like. And then after that, go through and evaluate each choice. So for A, skip meals are stressy. You might think to yourself, this looks familiar, but I need to consider all the options first. It might not be the best option. For B, always drink extra caffeine. Right away when I see that, I see the word always, and I think, normally the definite always or never are probably not the answer. So I go ahead and cross that one out. Then I would look at C, use preparation and review strategies. This might make sense, but is it the best example? And then finally getting to D, watch 5 hours of television. Obviously not relevant for an exam, so that one gets crossed out. So then after that, it's pretty obvious you can go through and choose C. So this is just a very simple example to kind of walk you through the mindset. Obviously on your actual exams, the answers are not going to be this obvious or this simple, but just the general kind of layout of how you go about that. Okay, so now if you have to choose multiple answers on like a select more than one, you have to consider each option one at a time. So identify information that you know is correct or incorrect. Anything that immediately stands out to you, definitely look at that and just evaluate, is this like accurate or not? Next up, you want to cross out the choices with a correct answer and choices with an incorrect answer. Sorry, I did not say that right. Yes, I did. Sorry, that's just a little confusing concept. But basically, if you see that an answer is correct, you can kind of star it and look at that. And then if the choice has an incorrect answer, obviously not going to want to put that. So if you end up having to guess, make sure you're choosing similar answers. You can look below at the example. And this person decided that taking notes and reviewing flashcards were pretty similar answers. definitely different from watching television. And so that's how they knew it wasn't all of the above or none of the above. So when you're thinking about changing answers, you should always go with your gut. I know this strategy is super helpful, but a little bit painful for me sometimes. I know if I'm overthinking a lot and if I suddenly decide I want to change my answer, chances are you probably shouldn't because it was probably right in the first place. Only change your answer if you recall additional information, miscalculate an answer, or misread the question. So now we're going to be moving into how to take essay exams. You'll be graded on the content of your essay and the organization of your essay. Be sure that you're including both important and relevant information in your response, and keep your organization straightforward so that your professor doesn't have to search for your answer. Be sure to identify what topic of your notes the question fits in. So when you remember studying, it can be helpful to identify keywords that might help you recall more information and relevant details. And once again, be sure to annotate the question by circling key verbs and underlining specific requirements. So on the right, you can see just a little list of words to look out for because those are going to be really defining words for the exam or the essay question. So now what to do on exam day. This is a really, really helpful list, so I definitely recommend taking notes or writing this down if you take a lot of essay exams. The first thing you're going to want to do is read the directions carefully. So how many questions are there? How many parts? How long should it be? Just making sure that you're answering every single part of the question is very important. The next thing you're going to want to do is plan your response. So this might be a short answer question, an essay question, solving problems. You just want to make sure you know how you're going to sort of go about it. And then the third step, obviously, is to actually write. So when you're doing this, something to remember is making sure that you're labeling where you've responded to all the points of the question and underlining keywords. And we're going to go over an example of this in just a minute. To go a little more in depth into the writing part, your argument is made up of a claim and evidence. So the claim is the what, and then the evidence is going to be the supporting details that go over when, where, why, and how. So when you're using specific examples, be sure to provide details and explain the relevance and the significance. Just making sure you're being very thorough without writing too much and sort of going overboard. So now we are going to go through this example really quick. This prompt says goals, effort, and self-efficacy are 3 factors that influence motivation. Describe each of these 3 factors and explain how they influence motivation. So the first thing that stands out to me or a student when you're taking this is the 3 different factors. So goals, effort, and self-efficacy. Right away, you can identify that those are going to be the 3 things you're going to be talking about. And then as you can see, describe and explain are circled because each factor needs a description and also a little bit of a longer explanation about how it influences motivation. So here you can see, it's hard to see exactly what they wrote, but the most important part is that they split up each topic into a different paragraph and they have underlined the most important parts. Okay, so now here are some helpful tips. These are once again going to be really helpful for you guys and just with your test taking skills. The first thing, especially with essay responses. So the first thing is be obvious. Clearly state your position and include a topic sentence and underline keywords like we saw in that last example. The second thing is keep moving. So start with the part of the outline that you feel most confident. As you are going through this, you will probably start to remember other things that might be important. So just starting with the section most confident is definitely great advice. If you forget the exact term for a word, don't stress about it, just sort of describe it and get around it that way. And then another helpful thing you can do is do a mind dump. So basically write out Write out what you're thinking, write out your main points, that sort of thing, and then you can kind of sort through that and start organizing your ideas in a way that makes sense. And then lastly, when you're reviewing your answers, make sure you read the instructions again and check off each step you've completed. This is really fantastic for making sure that you're not missing anything and that you've covered all the information thoroughly. Another thing to do is be familiar with common exam terms. I'll send this link in the chat at the end of the presentation, so you can look through this if you want. Another great tip is to utilize the Campus Writing Center or create a study group. And then lastly, just make sure you're checking your language. It is totally okay to make mistakes. Your exam or essay grade is not going to be based on perfect grammar. The most important part is to make sure that it is readable for the professor so that they can grade you accurately. So thank you all so much for joining. I really appreciate you guys coming here today, and I hope you learned something important. I'm going to go over a quick little overview of the Dennis Learning Center and the services that we offer. So the first thing we do is our workshops. Obviously, you're attending one today. We have a lot more workshops, as you can see, and those are all available through the First Year Success Series. And I think actually next week we have another series coming up, just kind of preparing students for coming into school. So check out our website if you're interested in that. I can send that link in the chat too. The next thing we offer is our classes, our flagship class, ESE PSY 1259. I took this course my freshman year and it helped me so much. All of our courses are proven to help students raise their GPA. I think it's by an average of like 0.4. So this class does make a pretty significant difference on your learning and how you do in college. I definitely recommend checking it out if you are interested. And then the last thing we offer is free academic coaching appointments. They're 1 hour long, a one-on-one appointment with a coach, and they will talk with you about anything related to test take or like study strategies. So that's test taking, time management, procrastination. Will help you set goals and keep you accountable. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you're struggling academically or just want some tips to better help you in a situation. And then finally, thank you guys. If you're interested, go ahead and follow our social media. And thank you for attending the workshop today with me.
Thank you so much, Maddie. That was great. Students, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them out loud or in the chat. We did that very efficiently, so we have plenty of time if people do have questions they would like to ask. If not, that is fine too. I would just give my usual reminder to check out our orientation calendar in the Carmen course. We still have a lot of events going on this week and this weekend before the start of classes. So be sure that you're participating, as I'm sure you are, in a lot of our in-person and virtual programs that we have going on. So thank you all so much for joining us. So it looks like we do have a question here. Do you have coaching class for writing fellowship proposal? Maddie, do you know the answer to that? If there any coaching, is there any coaching specifically for that topic?
That sounds a little bit more like tutoring, and that is not part of what we do. We help with study strategies and that sort of thing, but we don't do anything content related. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that.
I would say though, I believe the Writing Center, and I can give the link to that in the chat if you want. The Writing Center could definitely help you with that, though. I think I know that they work a little bit more with students on writing projects and that type of thing. So I will find the link to that to the webpage where you can read more about their online and in-person consultations. Any other questions? Great, let me find that link for you real quick, and then if there isn't anything else, we can wrap up. And like I mentioned in the chat, I did put the link for where the recordings from the workshops last week and this week are posted. We do have most of those up already. Let's see. Yeah, so there's the link for the Writing Center. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning, and best of luck for your first week of classes next week. Thanks again, Maddie.
Thank you.